The next is the deity claims, and this is one that's kind of had a big comeback in recent years, and I actually think the movie Dan Brown did, The Da Vinci Code, added a lot to this perspective that people seem to have. So I'm going to let Daniel Wallace, my favorite textual critic, give you a little taste of how to respond to that.
We come back to that great scholar, Dan Brown, and he has Sir Lee Teabing tell Sophie in France about the Council of Nicaea in AD 325, when Constantine allegedly declared that Jesus is God, and this is the first time it came about. My dear, he declared, until that moment in history, Jesus was viewed by his followers as a mortal prophet, a great and powerful man, but a man nonetheless, a mortal. Well, he's saying that Constantine invented the deity of Christ, and I have seen plenty of skeptical apologist books that make this very same claim, like that Muslim. An ounce of evidence is worth a pound of presumption. This is much more than an ounce of evidence. It's papyrus number 66. It's about 125 years older than that Council of Nicaea. And that Council of Nicaea, Constantine did not make up the deity of Christ. They were simply trying to define what they already believed in words that could be put into a confession. This manuscript has almost all of John in it, and this is the very first page, 125 years before the Council of Nicaea. And so what it says in John 1:1 is certainly going to be quite different from what we have later, because Constantine invented the deity of Christ. So read along with me if you would. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. You don't have that in your Bibles, do you? Of course you do. Every Bible says that. It might say it in slightly different words, like what God was, the Word was. I love that translation. But every single manuscript of John's Gospel, no matter the date, no matter the language, says virtually the same thing in John 1:1. Jesus is unequivocally called God.
So I think he puts that better than I can put it. Basically, people that question whether Jesus claimed to be God are really questioning what the Bible says. And that's the reason he was crucified. He was crucified for blasphemy. The blasphemy was he made himself equal with God, when you read the account of the trial. And people have tried to say that it changed over time. And the nice thing about P66 is it predates all the councils that people often claim were what corrupted the concept of Jesus. And 125 years prior to the councils is probably enough to say that it did not shift. Plus, if you're talking about 100 years after Jesus, it's really close to the event when you're talking about a written document in the ancient world, which we know was not original. It had to have been copied many times over. You're talking about a document that probably dates from a couple of decades after Jesus' death. We kind of did a couple of the timelines before when we did the chain of custody for the Gospel of John. So deity of Christ, we know he claimed it. So the question is, well, is he God? And C.S. Lewis famously had this quote. He said, the reality is Jesus is either a lunatic, a liar, or he is Lord. And we have to come to grips with this. Jesus cannot just be a good teacher or a moral teacher. He can't. If they use good, and Jesus himself says, what makes you say that I am good? Because only God is good. So when you say I'm good, you've already admitted that I have to be God. And he's either crazy, because he made such an outlandish claim, he's lying about it, or he's Lord. And the resurrection is the proof that he is who he said he is, which we'll get to a little bit. But I'm going to let you listen to someone other than me talk for a second. This is Frank Turek addressing this particular issue.
They had a big motive to deny the resurrection. They're Jews. They don't want to get kicked out of the temple. They don't want to be excommunicated. They don't want to be thrown out of the chosen people club. There's only two possibilities when it comes to the resurrection. It either happened or it didn't happen, right? If it happened, then Jesus is Lord. You've heard Lord, liar, lunatic, right? Okay, he's the Lord, okay? If it didn't happen, either the apostles, the New Testament writers, lied, or what's the other option? They were deceived. They were mistaken, right? They thought he had resurrected from the dead, and they wrote it down and they went and died for it, but he didn't really die, or he didn't really rise from the dead. Now, why are these two things implausible? Well, they had no motive to lie about the resurrection, as we've already pointed out, right? Because all they got, they were beaten, tortured, and killed for saying it was true. In fact, they had a big motive to deny the resurrection. They're Jews. They don't want to get kicked out of the temple. They don't want to be excommunicated. They don't want to be thrown out of the chosen people club. Why would they do this? Could they have been mistaken? Well, they had no expectation of a resurrection. They weren't expecting a resurrection and then maybe saw him and assumed he had risen from the dead when he really hadn't. They weren't expecting it. And if they were mistaken, they could have easily been corrected by enemies showing Jesus' dead body. They could have just gone to the tomb and taken out Jesus' body and said, stop all this nonsense talk about the resurrection. He's dead. They didn't do that. Why? Because he wasn't dead. So, seems to me it really did happen, and this is the conclusion. Jesus is Lord, and if Jesus is Lord, then all we need to do is see what he wants us to do.
So I like how Frank puts that. But if you're going to admit that Jesus lived, and you're going to admit that he died, and you have to accept the fact that he made claims that he was God. So if you have those, then you have to kind of take a good look at the resurrection. But I think we need to look at the crucifixion, because believe it or not, there are alternative views about the crucifixion, that Jesus really didn't die. Let me just go to that. So, Jesus' death by crucifixion. Alternative theory is what they call the swoon theory, or the resuscitation theory. I don't know, has you guys heard this theory before? It is inventive at the best. The origin of this is a guy by the name of H.E.G. Paulus in 1828. And his premise was that Jesus merely fainted on the cross. Okay, don't laugh yet. Jesus was then mistakenly buried alive and then appeared after being resuscitated. And okay, let's just go through this a little bit. So, people actually will spout this it's like, oh, it's so obvious. Okay, so for starters, Romans knew how to kill people. And they had no reason to be sympathetic to Jesus. The account in the Bible is that he was let out and crucified, and they confirmed he was dead, right? Romans knew how to kill people. And the Bible account, and even one of the non-Christian accounts, talks about him being tortured before he was crucified. And Romans knew how to torture people. They intended...
Because he was unrecognizable, so...
Well, I mean, this is a bad picture of what the phlegrum looks like.
Most people that scourge usually don't even make it to the crucifixion.
Yeah, they usually died.
They died before.
And in fact, he was so weak he couldn't carry his cross, which indicates he was probably near death before he even got to the cross. Right. So the fact that someone would somehow be able to resuscitate after the scourging alone, let alone the crucifixion and hanging on the cross for hours, and not just hanging on the cross, with 6-inch nails through your wrists and through your feet, and you're hanging on those, and then somehow you're going to be able to walk away on those feet. I find it a little optimistic that Jesus would have been in enough of a condition where he could even have walked away, when we know what we know about crucifixion in the ancient world. And another thing that's kind of interesting, I won't get into it, but this is some pictures of the Shroud of Turin. If you've never looked at this, I suggest you look at some of the documentaries. I'm not proclaiming that this is Jesus. Nobody can say that, but there's some very interesting things about the Shroud of Turin, which we can positively apply to what we're talking about. There is evidence of some sort of forehead damage, the scourging on the body. So even if this was not Jesus, it shows you very clearly what the damage to the body would have looked like.
I don't know what you're talking about.
The Shroud of Turin? They discuss, well, there is a linen cloth that has been held in Turin, Spain?
No, the one where he went to.
Milan.
Milan.
It's in Milan, Italy, yeah.
Italy.
And it has always been proponed to be the burial cloth of Jesus. And it has this image imprinted on it. Interesting thing about the shroud, and I won't go any further this, is in the late 1800s, the church where it was kept caught on fire. And so if you see the full shroud, you'll see all these burn marks. It was folded up, so a corner got burnt. When you open it up, there's no discoloration around the flame. You know, when you burn something, especially if it has dye or something on there, tends to be these discoloration. The part that burned away is gone, but there's no discoloration to the cloth. And there was a group of atheist scientists that went to do they did all these atomic tests, and they're trying to figure out how to reproduce this, to disprove it as Jesus. Most of them are now Christians because what they saw they can't explain. The shroud cannot be reproduced by modern techniques of any sort. So whether it's Jesus or not, it is very amazing archaeological find. And there's a couple documentaries that if you're interested in it, it's worth watching.
Oh, it's like this cloth. It's like the one they used to wrap the body, but you can see a face like that.
Not just the face, the whole body.
Yes, you can see the imprint, and they cannot explain how those things. It's like a radioactive thing that got transferred to the cloth.
So
Well, the interesting thing about the image is it's only on that outside. When you dye a cloth, the dye sinks into the fibers. This is not. It's just on the surface. Yet it can't be removed. It's just a remarkable thing. But it shows the wrist impressions. It shows a stab to the torso. It shows the feet.
blood pooling. There's blood on the forehead, like,
I don't want to make this about the Shroud of Turin,
No,
but
but-
it's very compelling.
we don't know, but
But what it does for us is it does give us physical evidence of what a crucified person would have looked like with the injuries that are described about Jesus. Whether this is Jesus or not, this person had similar injuries. There's no way they survived.
When a person like put on the cross.
Yeah, there definitely was crucified. Yeah, so it's, if nothing else, it gives us evidence of what that would have looked like and the extent of the injuries, which in our case, it proves that if Jesus really was scourged and crucified, he died. Okay, and in fact, there is not a single historical account of anybody surviving a full Roman crucifixion. People were pulled down from the cross because of a few different variety of reasons, and they survived. But people that were hung there and until they took them down, all died. Okay, and they stabbed Jesus basically in the heart to make sure he was dead. And we won't go into those details, but the bottom line is to say he resuscitated is a very remarkable concept, but that's not it. He was put in a tomb like this, and the tomb is described in the Bible. And this is a tomb in Israel. They actually found one of these in Nazareth that looks like this. And it was a common where they had this rolling stone. It's on a slope. So one person could close it, but it would take a whole heap of guys to get it moved out of the way. And from the inside, it's impossible to open. I mean, it's impossible. There's no way. So an injured Jesus is going to fill around in the dark and then move a stone that would take 20 guys to move from the inside. In fact, it's impossible to open it from the inside. So the resuscitation and doesn't make any sense. Well, I said he just fainted and he came back. The whole theory, there's a book by Holding down here, it goes through the whole theory, is this idea that the coolness of the tomb helped him to be resuscitated. The loss of all his blood obviously was not, never mind. But it's, well, not to mention is when he was laid into the tomb, they did Jewish burial rites with him. He was wrapped up tightly. I don't think you could have got out of the shroud to start with, but there's 40 pounds of brewing spices on top of you. And I mean brewing, it's fermenting your body. That's the purpose of it, right? So
Have you discussed the water separated?
I wasn't going to go that far.
But some modern evidence that's what dead bodies do.
Yeah, so there's groups in Christianity that take a different perspective to that, but obviously we have medical professionals, and so we'll talk about it. When they stab Jesus and the water comes out, well, that's what a dead body does. Okay, the water and the blood separates. So the fact that water gushed out of him, I know some Catholic brethren think that is the miracle of the water, but it's just it's the natural progression of a dead body. He'd probably been dead for a while. He's up there for 6 hours. He might have been dead for 2 or 3 of those hours. That's the reason there's water when they stab him, right? So that's, again, evidence of death. And that's what the Roman soldier was trying to do, is prove he's dead. Well, they see water come out. They know he's dead.
It's not water. It's just clear.
It's clear liquid. It's
still body fluid.
It's body
It's not
fluid.
water.
It just looks like water, right?
It looks like water.
So that's why they did not bother breaking his leg.
Yeah, you don't need to. He's already dead. And they've confirmed that death by that. So the swoon theory suggests that Jesus somehow revived after 3 days in the tomb and then supposedly unwrapped himself from these dressings and got out from under this heavy pile of stuff. And then in the darkness, he rolled the tomb away, which was impossible to roll away from inside. And then he got away unnoticed by the guards. They didn't notice him rolling the stone away from the inside. And then he went to his disciples, and they didn't recognize him. But then what happened to Jesus after 40 days? We don't know. If he resuscitated, why wasn't he still active? It's just a crazy theory. And I know we often, I call it a crazy theory, but we recognize that they have a significant problem in proving their theory. And what we should do is ask them questions of how this, how that. Why do you think that? Because it takes a lot more faith to believe in a theory like this than it does to just read the historical accounts that aren't in the Bible and say, oh, this is what happened, because this is what Josephus says, or this is what Tacitus says. These aren't Christian guys. I think they have a better idea than some guy from the 1800s that just wanted to not deny that Jesus was God. So I'm going to, what time is it? Why don't we take a break before I go forward, and then we're going to talk about what, I'm going to let you listen to Nabil Qureshi a little bit, and he has a little talk about what the Muslims think about Jesus. And I think that would kind of help us move into some of the alternate theories for the resurrection. Okay?